A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Really looking forward to this next conversation with our very special guest, because many people experience challenges and trauma in our childhood and adolescent years. And these experiences unknowingly shape us as adult human beings. And this can be expressed through thought patterns, attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. And we subconsciously adopt and act these out as a response to our previous trauma. And sadly, these responses can hinder us in our life and work, and even sometimes stop what God wants to do in our lives, because our faith and our relationships with others can be sabotaged. But the good news is God wants all of us 100% free. And Jesus promised that when we abide in His word, we are both His disciples and also free indeed. And so today, our special guest will help us to identify limiting factors in our lives and how to apply biblical truth to these areas so that we too can be free and be everything God has called us to be. Anna Harris is a certified trauma and resilience life coach and is the founder of Defined by God Ministries. And I want to welcome Anna to 2020 today. Anna, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Anna, you're joining us from one of the best states in the world. I'm just going to say, I'm going to put it out there and say Texas in the United States is definitely one of the best states in the world. We want to thank you for joining us. It's your evening time, our morning time here. But Anna, I want to just start by asking a really simple question. Why is Anna Harris a certified trauma and resilience life coach?
Well, the main reason that I began to study trauma and PTSD and really want to help other people is because I had overcome trauma in my own life. And it's a process, it's a journey, but I knew the things that had worked for me. And I've always been the type of person that when I learn something, I want to teach other people about it and help them walk in that same thing. And so that's why I do what I do, because I've found things that have worked for me. And so I help others to get that same type of healing and freedom.
And do you get a lot of joy out of what you do about seeing people experience transformation and healing and wholeness? Is it something that really, like the cliche says, makes you want to get up in the morning?
Yes, it absolutely is. I do a combination of trauma recovery coaching and heart healing. And I am just seeing amazing results with people. They're just coming into where they're aware of their heart, they're aware of their emotions, they're aware of their body when they're getting dysregulated, and they're learning how to self-regulate and to be able to manage their stress and that kind of thing. And then on top of that, they're also getting healing for a lot of the hurts that they've had from the past as well. So it's just a great combination.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think the Western world is fairly similar now. It doesn't matter if you're talking about Britain, Australia, America, Canada, New Zealand, parts of Europe. Culture's very similar now. So what would you say are the main things contributing towards trauma and PTSD in adults in the Western world today?
A lot of people really struggled during the pandemic. There was a lot of anxiety during that time, and maybe things that they had been able to sort of manage before that just got bigger and harder to manage. And a lot of people have not really completely recovered in that way. And then, of course, we have so much stuff going on in the world, war in different places, political unrest in different places. And so all of those kinds of things can cause people to have stress and anxiety. And then we have our own personal issues. Like for me, when I grew up with, I realized later I had PTSD as a child, and that informed a lot of my decisions and a lot of my beliefs about myself. So there's that combines with, culture and things that are happening in the world.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So you said that you had trauma as a child and that affected beliefs about yourself and behaviors. What sort of beliefs about yourself did you have that you were consciously aware of?
Well, they were very deep beliefs, and so I don't know if I would have said, this is what I think about myself, but it was deep down. And so some of the things that I believed about myself growing up, I believed that I didn't have a right to exist. I don't belong anywhere. Like everybody else belongs. They belong to that group. They belong to that class, that little, Sunday school class or whatever it is. They all belong, but I don't belong. I'm on the outside. And I had so many fears. I was always worrying, which now I would call it anxiety, but I didn't know that word back then. And so those kinds of things were things I believed. And I was always afraid someone was wanting to murder me. And I was very much controlled by fear when I was growing up.
Yeah, that's really serious. And so obviously you know the answer, but why do you think you had these thoughts of that, you didn't belong anywhere and you felt a real inability to connect to people? Where did that come from?
Well, I found out later. I always knew when I was born, I was adopted. I was put up for adoption at birth. And I was raised in a loving and stable home. I had everything that I needed. And so I was like, well, why would being adopted impact me? I don't remember it. I don't remember when I was in the womb. I don't remember being separated from my birth mother. Why would that have any kind of impact on me? But later in life, as I began to study trauma and PTSD, and I was looking at some of the symptoms of PTSD and complex PTSD, I was like, oh my goodness, I had PTSD as a child because I could check a lot of those boxes, like the hypervigilance, always on the alert for something to hurt you. Like that described me to a T as a child. And so
like never able to totally relax. Would that be a good description? You just could never really relax and enjoy the moment. You're always on edge, on guard, ready to defend yourself.
On alert. Yes, exactly. And that's definitely a symptom of PTSD. You can think of it as veterans that come home, from a war. They had to be on alert all the time when they're in the war zone, and then they come home and they still feel that I need to be on alert all the time. Well, that's how I was as a child and even into my 20s. So, yeah, so it impacted me for a long time.
Okay, and so yeah?
Well, I was going to say, I found out later that research now is telling us that our time in the womb and early childhood actually definitely impacts us. There's Dr. Gabor Mate is a well-known scientist, and he does a lot of research into trauma from the womb. And so all the things that I thought were a direct result of the traumatic time that I had in the womb. And I can tell you more about that in a minute. So
they've actually scientifically proven that experiences, even in the womb, can shape us as human beings.
Yes, absolutely. So when the birth mother is going through trauma, her body is producing lots and lots of stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol and other stress hormones that babies were not meant to experience, or at least not at that amount. And so it doesn't mean that every adopted child would have had this, but I found out later when I connected with my birth family that my birth mother definitely went through a lot of trauma when I was in the womb. And so my birth father did not want her to keep me, and he gave her an ultimatum. Basically, it was him or me. And so she was 21 years old. He was much older. So she's 21 years old, having to make a very, very difficult decision. And so I found out later she did not want to give me up, but she just felt like, she didn't have any choice in the matter. And so all of that trauma, the arguing, the chaos that was going on in her life as a tiny baby, I picked up on that, and I felt, this is my fault. We don't have conscious thoughts when we're babies. Well, we don't have words. And so, all that chaos, I decided I'm the cause of all of this chaos, and I shouldn't be here. I don't have a right to exist. I need to be quiet and hide. So those were things that were going on in the womb, and it really perfectly explains why I was the way I was when I was growing up.
Yeah, in retrospect, you can understand it all. So you were driven by subconscious drivers and feelings and attitudes and thoughts, like you said. It's really deep, isn't it? But there's another area of trauma that you also specialize in, and this is religious trauma. And I think this is a really growing area in the West as well. Tell me about religious trauma. What is it, and how does it usually happen?
Well, religious trauma and spiritual abuse are very related. And so usually when there is an environment that is spiritually abusive, the trauma comes when we've been in that environment for a long time. It's impacted our decisions about our lives, our beliefs about ourselves and about God. And many times, if you're in especially like a high control type of religion, a highly controlling church, when you leave that church, most of the people will no longer be your friends. And so you won't have contact with your community and things like that. And so the whole experience can be very traumatizing. The things that are taught can be traumatizing and abusive. A lot of times in this type of environment, God is represented as if he is a taskmaster. He's angry. You better do all the things that you're supposed to do, or he's going to be mad at you. And really, that's a form of control. Some people are just trying to get you to do the things they want you to do. And so this type of environment is not healthy for us. It's not healthy for our nervous system. It's not healthy for us spiritually. And so oftentimes people decide to leave. But the leaving is hard too, because a lot of times it's not all bad. It's not 100% bad, or you wouldn't have joined that place to start with. And so you have to sift through, what has been harmful for me and what's been beneficial? What do I believe? What am I going to take away? Really, self-care is very important. Learning how to take care of yourself and put your own mental health and spiritual health and physical health as a priority. And so one of the hardest things that about spiritual abuse and religious trauma is that it's in a spiritual setting. It's in a setting where we're with leaders that we look up to. We respect them. We feel like we should be in an environment of love and where we're growing and that kind of thing. And then to have something happen where we feel, well, I'm not actually safe here. This is not actually a healthy environment for me. It can cause confusion. It can cause hurt. And it's just, it's something that we have to walk through with the Lord.
Yeah, and you're finding more and more people are seeking help from yourself for religious trauma?
Yes, yes, definitely. And over the years, I've talked with a lot of people who've told me lots of different stories. But these days, there's a lot of people that are leaving churches because they just are not agreeing with the way that God is being represented, and they're just not agreeing with the environment that they're in. But yeah, a lot of times it's control is a big factor in spiritual abuse.
And in those settings, when you say the way God is being represented, often how is God represented? You said before angry, a taskmaster. How else is God represented?
Well, often judgmental, or like someone that we need to please. We need to do all these different things in order to please him. And then another thing, and this is what I thought, I thought that God was very distant, that we can get to know Jesus, but that God is far away, he's distant, and he's a little bit irritated and definitely judgmental, watching to see if we're going to mess up and that kind of thing. And so when we can learn about his true nature and character, that he's a loving father, that he's not just watching to see if we mess up, that he wants the best for us, that he sent his son so that we could have life and have abundant life. And so that's what God wants for us. That's his heart. And sometimes I think things get blamed on God, like you need to do all these things. You need to conform to the way that we want you to be in order for God to approve of you. And that's just not true. The Father loves us for who we are. He created us. We're made in his image, and he wants us to flourish and to grow and have abundant life.
Yeah, it's like you're there, but you're not quite there, and you never quite get there. There's always something else to do, and you strive, and that is really the heart of religion, isn't it? Religion is man's attempt to work their way to God. Christianity is God came down to the earth and brought us into relationship with him without us having to do anything other than to believe. I love the way when you start talking about the Father heart of God, and we'll talk more about that after the news. But I want to ask our listeners today, have you experienced trauma, or have you been able to identify trauma in your life and actually got a good news story for us where you've worked through it and you've seen real healing and real wholeness come to you? And have you experienced religious trauma and you've known you've had to leave a certain group or community or church because it wasn't very healthy for you, but you found healing and wholeness from that as well? We'd love to hear your stories, or maybe you've got a question for our guest today. Her name is Anna Harris. She's a certified trauma and resilience life coach, and she helps people work through things that have happened to them in life, whether it be religious trauma or childhood trauma. And what I love about Anna is she has a revelation of the Father heart of God, and she points people toward the scriptures, and she points people towards the Father heart of God. We're going to take a short break now, but you can join the conversation today. We'd love to hear your stories or your thoughts, or maybe you got a question for Anna. Give us a call on 1-800-316-316. That's 1-800-316-316.
There are many ways people listen to Vision. AM or FM radio, on our website, through the Vision app, or even on the Vast satellite platform. If you watch TV at home through Vast, why not check it out? Just select channel 614 on your set-top box. To find out more about all the ways you can listen to Vision, head to vision.org.au/radio. That's vision.org.au/radio. Vision.
Grandparents play a significant and influential role in the lives of their grandchildren. On Saturday, the 31st of August, station sponsor National Grandparent Movement presents the 2024 National Grandparent Conference. Join in online or in person and get ready to be encouraged and inspired to embrace your potential to invest in the lives of your grandchildren. Secure your place today for the 2024 National Grandparents Conference at ngmlegacy.com.
It takes a big family to keep Vision on the air across Australia. Individuals, churches and businesses like Osmed Health for Australian-made face masks, rapid antigen tests and more. See osmedhealth.com.au.
Helping you make sense of life, culture and current events from a biblical perspective. 2020 on Vision.
Welcome back to 2020. We're talking today about trauma, and more importantly, working through trauma and allowing God to heal us from trauma. And that trauma can be a childhood experience, or it can even be a religious trauma experience in a religious community, or even a faith community, a Christian church sometimes too. There's just a little bit off centre, and we're asking you for your stories. We want to hear stories of people who've worked through that or experienced that, or maybe you've got a question for our special guest today, whose name is Anna Harris. She's joining us all the way from Texas in the US of A, and it's her evening, our morning time here where I'm standing, but we've got a couple of calls already, and one of them is Esther from Albany in Western Australia, way over the other side of Australia. Esther, thank you for calling us today.
Thanks for having me.
Would you like to ask a question or make a comment? What have you got for us today?
It's just interesting that the topic's come up today. I'm really processing what's going on. I've just come back from a family holiday and been around my family and realised, a lot of this stuff is what I'm dealing with. So really just interested to see what advice could get.
Sure. Did you hear all that, Anna?
Yes. And so what specifically are you thinking about? You said you just left a time with your family and...
Yeah, so just being around particularly my father, I just realised the heaviness and the weight and the stress that just comes up being around him. And I think particularly I'm thinking about how I get help for myself and my children in a way, but also I guess I handled something. I think he's particularly triggered from, I can see a long line of family trauma, and that gets passed on. Yeah, and so I guess like I feel like I'm sort of, there's this response really of I feel obligated as a Christian to care for my family members and to love them, but is that enabling things, and how am I called to break that in terms of it's a big topic. It's kind of hard to put it all to words.
Yeah, I think I can see where you're going with it. One of the main things to consider is a couple of things. One is keeping yourself safe emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And so, like getting some therapy for yourself, or, coaching for yourself. And then you'll have to decide how much how often, how much can I be around certain family members and still stay safe. Maybe I can go and have a coffee with them every once in a while, but I'm not going to go spend a weekend there, because that might just be too much emotionally to be around. One of the things, especially in, Christian cultures, we think sometimes, well, I'm a Christian, I have to forgive. And that means that I've got to have a relationship and I've got to honor my family and this type of thing. And so, of course, we do want to walk in forgiveness, but that does not mean that we need to put ourselves in unsafe situations that are going to be unsafe emotionally and spiritually too. And so that's something that you'll need to consider, and it's okay, like it's part of self-care to have a healthy boundary for you and for your children. And you can decide how much you can be around them. Now, in certain situations, if someone has had control and that type of thing, they may not be very happy when they're no longer having control. I don't know if that's your situation or not, but you just have to be okay with someone not always being happy with you. It's okay to set healthy boundaries. Even Jesus set healthy boundaries. And, there's a great scripture, I think it's in Mark, where it talks about there were so many people around that he and his disciples didn't even have time to eat. And so he said, let's go away to a quiet place so we can rest. So he was setting some healthy boundaries because he knew they needed rest, they needed a place to eat, to be quiet. So sometimes we have to make those safe places for ourselves as well. So I hope that answers your question. But if you have another question, go ahead.
Yeah.
Does that resonate with you, Esther? Do you think that's applicable to your situation, just forming those healthy boundaries but still honouring and loving your family?
Yeah, I think and over the years I've slowly started to develop boundaries, and I guess they're just getting more and more, realising just how much of a distance I need to put between us. And yeah, I think it's a really big topic to unpack on the air, but I guess the answer, I suppose, is that I need to go and get some help from a psychologist or something. And also, I think for my children as well, because they witnessed my dad like blowing up in anger recently, so that wasn't so good.
Yeah, well, it sounds like that Anna's advice is good with the boundaries. And but Esther, like you said, you're on a journey. We're all on a journey. But I want to just thank you so much for reaching out today and calling us and being a part of the conversation. And Anna Harris also has a website, and you can check that out. It's definedbygod.com, and you can check out her resources online, as can all of our listeners. And I think she has some clients in Australia as well. So I'll let you guys decide if you want to connect further. But Esther from Albany in WA, I want to thank you so much for joining us on 2020 today.
Thank you.
Bernie, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Bernie, you're from Melbourne, Victoria, just for Anna's benefit. Melbourne is the very southern part of Australia. Anna, but have you got a comment or a question for Anna today, Bernie?
Yes, I have. My comment is, well, first of all, thank you, Anna. It's amazing the amount of insight you've given me so far. It's incredible. But I'm actually in the middle of a situation in my church. So my question is, what does one do, or what would your advice be if you're not heard in relation to a complaint?
Well, I think one of the things, first of all, is to consider, what kind of complaint, and I'm not asking you to necessarily give particulars, but if it's something that's really unhealthy for you, is it something that is abusive toward you? Because there's a difference, and sometimes we have to sort this through in what is spiritual abuse and what is an environment that is maybe unhealthy. So there's like a rating scale that you could consider. And is this the first time it has happened? Is this the way leadership always is? They never listen to anyone? Or is this maybe just like a one-time thing that you need to find a good way to communicate? I think so. There could be a lot of different factors there.
I hear what you're saying. And my position, as I see it, and of course, this is in a spiritual sense, as I go to the Bible for my references and I go to God's Word for my advice, not people. So there's a saying that has been spoken to me a number of times, and that is, for such a time as this. We are here for such a time as this. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, from the book of Esther. So you're just saying you're. It sounds like you're in a bit of a dilemma there, Bernie, that you want to talk to someone in a faith community, by the sounds of it, about an issue. And I guess my advice would be to speak to the relevant person, which is obviously one of the leaders. And all you can do is go there and speak in an assertive way, in a positive way, not a critical or a negative way, but express yourself and your point of view. And I guess, Anna, if someone does that and they're not heard, what would your advice be, Anna, if that's what happens?
Yes, if they go and talk to leadership and try to, in an honoring and healthy way, and they're still not heard, then that's when you do need to consider: is this the right place for me? Is this the right spiritual community for me? And maybe it's not. Maybe it's time to look elsewhere and to find a place where you really feel like you belong and that is safe and healthy for you.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. And Bernie, we've got a lot of people waiting on hold here, but I want to thank you so much for calling us on 2020 today.
Thanks, Andrew.
God bless you. Have a super day. Have a super day. And we've got another caller waiting as well, and that is Sue. And Sue is calling also from Melbourne. Sue, welcome.
Hello, how are you both?
All the better for hearing from you, Sue. What have you got for us today, a question or a comment?
Just a comment. I'd really like to share something. Just very, very quickly, as a little girl, I always believed in God, but Jesus was not in the picture. Got born again in 1977, so everything fell into place.
It was a good year, Sue. It was a great year, wasn't it?
It was an excellent year, excellent. And I've never looked back since. But I wanted to share, the Lord has put on my heart this year to write my story, okay, for His glory. And part of when I started writing it, I said, Lord, I need to share this. As a young child, I was sexually abused constantly by my father, okay? I used to pray to my God because I loved this big God that made everything, everything I loved. But I can remember one instant when we were out, we were in a car lights came towards the car. We were in the back seat, and as a little girl of about 7, 8, I thought the police are going to get me. Because as a little child, sometimes you know things are wrong when they're wrong, okay? And I went into shame and fear as a little girl. About 2 days after that, when I was talking to God and saying, God, I love you, God, this is what the Lord said to me, and this is what the Lord has said to me to share to people, whether they're adults or children, for healing, okay? As we know, God speaks specifically, and His words to me were, it's not your fault. Your daddy is a very sick man. From that moment on, as that little girl, I realized it's not my fault. And because the Lord could have said, your dad's a this or a that, or he's whatever, okay? But as a little girl, you love your daddy, correct? And any little girls or little boys want to love their daddy. And the Lord's words were, your daddy is a very sick man. And that set me free from shame, from trauma, from so many other things that could have destroyed me later on. I never, ever held bitterness or hatred towards my father. I looked at him and thought, you're a very sick man, Daddy. You're a very sick man. And I believe there's a lot of girls speaking to little girls even that now are grown up that need to hear whoever, and little boys too, that whoever did that to them as a child were very sick people, and it's not their fault. And I believe I believe the Lord wants people to hear that because it's so important.
I think that is important. That's very important for people to know. And a lot of times when I am coaching or ministering to someone, the Lord will go into those places in their heart and take away that shame. And so I hope you write your story. I think that would be helpful for people, because when people can, see similar situations, it can help them. So that would be a healing story for people. And
yeah, definitely. So I just wanted to share that, and the work you're doing is amazing, and I'm obviously a Vision supporter always, and I just love you guys, all what you do, and Anna, just bless you for what you're doing to help people. It's just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. So and, Sue, what I love about your story is that when you felt God speak to you, it brought a sense of compassion to your heart, didn't it? It didn't bring anger or hatred, like you said. And I think for all of us, if we have been hurt or traumatized by someone, if we can have that compassion for them, not that we're condoning their actions, it saves us from the hatred and the unforgiveness and the bitterness, which can also destroy us down the track, can't us? Because the act of the abuse and the trauma is bad enough, but if we don't let go and we don't forgive, the secondary effect of that can be just as damaging, in fact, sometimes even worse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I just, as I said, it's just something I really feel so important for so many people to know. It wasn't their fault, it wasn't your fault.
That's very true. Yeah. Thank you.
Sue, thank you so much for calling all the way from Melbourne today. Appreciate you calling. You're always welcome to call us back on 2020.
Thank you so much, and God bless you all. And I love Vision.
Thanks, Sue. Thank you.
So much.
And we've got another caller waiting very patiently, Anna, and it is Cheryl from a place called Port Macquarie, which has the best climate, they say, in Australia. It's about halfway between Brisbane and Sydney, and it's got really nice weather all year round, and it's also on the beach. It's a beautiful place. Cheryl, have you got a question or a comment today?
I just wanted to call in and give some people some hope, because I'm somebody that's come out of a 17-year-long abusive marriage. It's been a few years since I've been out. And I'm resonating a lot with what Anna's been saying with the trauma. It's been a completely learning experience. I've had to learn how to make decisions on my own again. You're retraining your mind to not think of all of the negative things that you've been told every day for such a long time. And I've even had to renounce fear and anxiety in the name of Jesus, because it's just filled my whole life for so long. But I'm out, I'm free. God has given me freedom. It started with 2 weeks of, I just need to find a safe place to go, which was my parents' house. And at that point, you can't make, the tough decisions, what to do next. You just have to get safe and think about, what is needed for your body, for your mind, for your soul. And probably the most important thing was living in God's word every day from that moment that I left. Making sure that his healing could take place in my life as well. And then, not doing it on my own. This is so important. You cannot do this on your own. You have to reach out for help. And for so long, I had kept what was happening to me silent. And even the abuse that I suffered as a child, as a teenager, I kept that quiet for so long as well, and held it inside. And it just wasn't healthy. And I want to give encouragement to anybody listening that's going through traumatic experiences. You're not on your own. God is with you. He kept me safe for so long and never left me or forsake me. And he's brought me out the other side. So I really want to encourage people to hold on and know that there is help for you, and you can call out for help and it will come. And it's so important. And sorry, I'm probably waffling now, so I'll let you go.
No, Cheryl, it's such a nice story, and you're giving hope to so many people listening. Anna, have you got a response for Cheryl today?
I was just going to say that I think that anyone listening and hearing what you're saying would be encouraged that, yes, there is hope on the other side. And then for you, I was just going to also encourage you to really think about self-care, like good self-care, prioritizing self-care and also self-regulation, because when you're coming out of a traumatic and abusive long-term situation, sometimes you've been living under chronic stress for a long time, and it's good to have really times of self-care and self-regulation so that you can reset your nervous system, so that instead of living under stress, that you can live in a healthy way and learn how to regulate your body and nervous system so that you're not having all the stress hormones all the time. So I was just going to encourage you in that.
That is amazing advice. I really appreciate that, because it is, I definitely was in burnout mode when I first came out. And it's hard, like living every day. The hardest part is not letting, yourself go into that fight and flight mode and just yell back at people that don't deserve it. Because I became a monster too. Like, I was being abusive back in the end because I was trapped. And now I'm trying to not be like that, and have self-control and have love. So thank you. That's amazing.
And can I ask, Anna, too, when you say self-regulate, what are some practical things people can do to self-regulate if no one really is familiar with that term? What do people do to self-regulate?
Well, some of the things, the first step of that is recognizing when you're dysregulated. And it's not that we have to be calm all the time. We just want to be balanced. We don't want to live in dysregulation all the time. So what dysregulation is when we're operating out of our amygdala, that fight or flight, part of our brain. And it causes certain things to happen in our body. And like our heart rate can go up, our breathing can be more shallow, our blood pressure rises, and we're not really able to operate out of our prefrontal cortex. That's where we make high-level decisions. And when we are in fight or flight mode, we're in survival mode. We're not thinking about, making big life decisions. We're just thinking about surviving. And so when someone's lived in that state for a long time, it's easy to just kind of stay there because it kind of feels normal. And so if you're realizing, that you're staying dysregulated a lot. It's also, anxiety and things like that. If you're realizing that you have stress in your body, tension in your body, a lot of times we hold our tension in our shoulders and in our neck and things like that. So if you're realizing that you are dysregulated, you can do some exercises to help you get back into a regulated state. So there are breathing exercises, grounding exercises. I'll just tell you a quick one that's really easy, which is box breathing, for example. So box breathing is breathing in for a count of 4, holding that breath for a count of 4, breathing out for a count of 4, and then you can continue to breathe out for another count of 4 or hold, and then do it again. And as we kind of slow down and we focus on our breath, it helps our body come into a more regulated state. There's a lot of different self-regulation exercises and grounding exercises that you can do. Movement is really good. Stretching is really good. Walking, all of those kinds of things are really good to help our body release the stress hormones.
There you go. Good advice. Cheryl, thanks again so much for calling in today. It's a real joy, and hopefully we'll hear from you again. And I'm hoping you found a good church community. You're in a good church down there in Port Macquarie?
Yeah, I'm going to Port Macquarie Baptist. I'll give them a shout out. It's a beautiful little church. I'm absolutely loving finding sort of new friends and just finding some support up here. It's quite special.
Awesome. I'm glad you gave them a shout out because I had a feeling you were going to a good church. That's good to know. The Port Macquarie Baptist Church is the place to go. Hey, Cheryl, God bless. Call us again sometime, and thank you so much for being a part of the conversation on 2020 today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
And we've got one more caller we can squeeze in, and it's Richard from Austinville. Richard, are you there?
Yeah. G'day, guys. I had 2 questions. First question, like you spoke about, like family and influence on family on life. And I come from a divorced background. My mother was divorced when we were both small children. But I grew up with a lot of other, like, extended family and stuff around on holidays and bits and pieces. But whenever you'd have conflict or something, or somebody would say something to you, it's like, well, we didn't bring you up this way, or we didn't do that. And that kind of made me feel in a lot of senses that not good enough or not adequate enough, or I've got to live up to this, or I've got to live up to that. And my family were great providers, my grandparents and my mother and this. But I had to do a lot of things for myself. And out of that, it's left me of how do I be grateful to family, but also understand, I've had to walk this, and I've had to do a lot of this with or God's had to do it in my life. How would you respond to that?
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like what you might be saying is that you had some conditional love in your family. Whereas if you do these certain things, then you receive love. But if you don't meet up to those standards, then you're not approved of or something. And is that what you're kind of saying?
It's kind of multi-layered, but along the lines of that is a very big part of it. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and no family is perfect. It's all kind of a mixed bag because we're not perfect. But I think one of the main things to do is to understand that your identity is who God created you to be, and that you can find your love and your belonging and your acceptance in Him and in your relationship with Him, and then. As long as your family isn't toxic to you, they're not unhealthy to you, then you can, just have as much of a relationship as you're able to with them, but really lean into your relationship with God and understand that is where your belonging, your true identity comes from there. And, whatever else it comes from your family, it's okay, so.
Yeah, thank you.
Does that resonate with you, Richard?
Yep.
Good on you, Richard. Well, thank you so much for joining the conversation today, and you have a nice day down there in Austinville in New South Wales. Well, Anna, we are drawing to a conclusion here, but I'd really like you just to close with your final thoughts or something you've got on your heart to share with us today.
Well, I did want to mention that I tell a lot of my story in my book that's coming out, which is called Not Abandoned. It's going to be coming out on September the 10th, and people can find it on my website, definedbygod.com. And I tell a lot of my story about growing up with trauma, and how God took me through a real healing process. And then I also tell the story because most of my trauma came from trauma from the womb and from being adopted. And so I tell the story of how God brought a lot of healing to my heart, and then later how I also connected with my birth family. So if you want to hear more of that story, then you can go to my website. There's a lot of ways to connect with me. I have some free resources there that you might like to have. And so just sign up for the free resources and you'll be informed when my book is released. It'll be released on September 10th. It's called Not Abandoned.
Not Abandoned, and your website is definedbygod.com. Well, we had constant callers today. Obviously, your message is resonating with so many of our listeners, and I do encourage you, if you really want to reach out to Anna, go to our website, definedbygod.com. We're going to have to get you back another time, Anna, because we didn't even get into the Father heart of God. You just got such a deep revelation of God's Father heart for us all, and I know that's a real foundation in the healing journey you take people on, isn't it? Just finding out how much God loves us as our Father.
Yes, it really is. It's been so foundational for me. Like, my entire identity is related to who God is as a father. So I'm His daughter, and coming to know that has been everything to me.
Yeah, and I just love it when you talk about it because it just resonates so strongly in my heart, because I know that it's a deep truth in your heart. And so, Anna Harris from definedbygod.com, I want to thank you so much for joining us on 2020 today and for joining us evening time Texas. So you go and have a good night's sleep now. We are just at the sort of halfway mark of our day here in different parts of Australia. But thanks, and we will definitely be hearing from you again.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.